Welcome back to the deep dive. Before we even get started, let's just lay out the three big ideas you're going to walk away with today. First, that biology at its core is an origami problem. How do you turn a flat sheet into a complex, functional tube?
Without tearing it, which is the hard part.
Exactly. Second, we're going to show you that your entire body plan is essentially a tube within a tube. And third, we're going to explain why the way you feel pain in your belly today was actually hardwired when you were just 4 weeks old.
It really is the ultimate origin story.
It is. Today, we are tackling episode 6. From flat disc to living form, we're talking about embryonic folding. And to really do this justice, we're pulling from what I think is the holy trinity of embryology texts.
Absolutely.
We've got the clinical powerhouse, Moore and Prasad's The Developing Human. We've got the exam prep Bible, which is I.B. Singh's Human Embryology. And we are bringing in Langman's Medical Embryology for those, absolutely crucial spatial visualizations of the mesoderm.
And as always, just a quick reminder for you tuning in, this deep dive is a synthesis. It's our interpretation of these amazing texts. We're here to be your audio guide, your ready reckoner.
Right.
But embryology is visual. You have to see it. So we really, really encourage you to keep your textbooks open, especially the chapters on the 4th to 8th weeks and the development of body cavities. Use our chat to spark that curiosity that makes reading those dense chapters actually, enjoyable.
So the mission for today is to solve a fundamental spatial problem. Last time we left the embryo as a trilaminar disc. It's flat, 3 layers. But a human being isn't a flat coaster. It's a 3-dimensional cylinder. How do we get from A to B?
That is the question of the 4th week, isn't it? You have this flat sort of ellipse, and you need to create a 3D organism. You need a gut on the inside, skin on the outside, and a very specific orientation of head versus tail.
And if this goes wrong, we're not just talking about a minor cosmetic issue, are we?
Oh, no. If folding fails, the entire body plan fails. And understanding this helps us solve some huge anatomical mysteries. I mean, by the end of this, you'll finally get why a nerve that starts way up in your neck, the phrenic nerve, is the thing responsible for your breathing way down in your chest.
Or, my personal favorite, why your heart actually begins its development above your brain before it does this incredible swing down into your chest.
It is one of the best party facts of embryology. It always gets a reaction.
It really does. So, let's set the stage. We are at the very beginning of the 4th week. What's the context here? What's happening?
We are entering what Moore and Prasad call the embryonic period proper. This runs from week 4 all the way to week 8. This is the main event. Everything before this was just setting up the stage, building the support systems. Now we are building the actual house.
So all the major organ systems get laid down here?
Every single one. The blueprints for every major organ system are established in this window.
Which I imagine makes it a uniquely dangerous time.
Extremely. Because differentiation, cells deciding what they want to be when they grow up is happening at an explosive rate. This makes it the period of highest susceptibility to teratogens.
Right, things that cause birth defects.
Exactly. If a mother is exposed to a harmful drug or a virus or radiation during this specific window, the consequences can be catastrophic because the foundational geometry of the body is being laid down right then and there.
So mechanically, what's the engine driving all this? Does the embryo have some sort of master plan it's following?
It's not a conscious decision. It's not thinking, I must fold now. It's pure physics. It's driven by a process we call differential growth.
Break that down for me. What does that mean?
Okay, imagine you have a balloon, and it's inside a rigid, unyielding box. If you start inflating that balloon, it can't expand outwards, right? The box is holding it in.
So it has to buckle.
It has to buckle and fold in on itself to fit into the available space. It has no other choice.
Okay, that's a great metaphor. So in our embryonic story, who is the balloon?
The balloon is the central axis. It's the neural tube, the future brain and spinal cord, and the somites, which will become the spine and muscles. They're growing explosively fast along that long head-to-tail axis.
And the box.
The box, in a way, is the edges of the disc and the yolk sac attached to the bottom. They just aren't growing nearly as fast. The center is dramatically outpacing the periphery.
So the middle arches up, and the slower-growing edges have no choice but to be pulled under. They curl.
Precisely. And at the exact same time, the amniotic sac around the whole thing is expanding rapidly, sort of pushing everything ventrally towards the belly. Now, I have to pause here because this is a classic point of confusion for students.
I think I know where you're going.
Textbooks, even the best ones like Moore and Langman, They have to separate this for clarity. They talk about head and tail folding, which is on the median plane, and then they talk about lateral folding on the horizontal plane.
Because you can't really draw a 4D movement on a 2D page.
You can't, but you, the listener, you have to visualize this as a synchronized swimmer doing a cannonball. The head curls down, the tail tucks under, and the sides roll in all at the exact same time. Yeah. It is one single, beautifully choreographed event.
A cannonball. I love that image. It really works. Okay, so let's slow down the film then. Let's look at the median plane first, just like the textbooks do. The head and tail folds. I think Moore calls this the folding of the ends. Let's start with the head fold, the cranial dive.
Okay, so to really appreciate the dive, you have to understand the starting lineup. It's completely counterintuitive. In the flat disc, at the very top, the most cranial end, you don't find the brain.
What? Where is it?
The most northern structure in the entire embryo is the septum transversum. This is a block of mesodermal tissue that will eventually become the central tendon of the diaphragm.
So my diaphragm starts out where my forehead should be.
Essentially, yes. Then, just south of that, you have the cardiogenic area, the collection of cells that will form the heart. And only then, south of the heart, do you finally have the neural plate, the future brain.
So let me get this straight. If I'm a flat disc, the order from top to bottom is diaphragm, heart, brain.
Precisely. It's completely inverted compared to an adult. It makes no sense.
That is absolutely wild.
But then, differential growth kicks in. The neural plate, specifically the forebrain, starts expanding at a massive rate. It grows forward, creating this bulge that overhangs the heart. It gets so relatively heavy and large that it just swings under. It performs this massive forward somersault.
And it acts like a bulldozer, pushing everything else in front of it.
That's a perfect way to put it. As the brain curls under and towards the belly side ventrally, it shoves the heart down into what will become the chest. And crucially, it flips the septum transversum so that it ends up lying below the heart.
So the order goes from diaphragm, heart, brain to brain, heart, diaphragm.
Order is restored. The anatomical universe makes sense again. But there's a really important secondary consequence to this curl. We're not just moving the heart around, we are pinching the yolk sac.
And this is where the tube starts to form.
This is it. As that head fold curls down, it traps a portion of the endodermal yolk sac inside the embryo. This pinched off pocket becomes the foregut.
And the foregut eventually becomes what?
It's the precursor to the pharynx, the esophagus, the stomach, and even the lower respiratory system. It's now trapped as a blind tube between the newly positioned brain and the heart.
Okay, that's the top end. So what's happening at the bottom? The tail fold.
The caudal tuck. Very similar mechanism. This is driven by the rapid growth of the distal neural tube, what will become the spinal cord. As it grows, the tail, or the caudal eminence, projects over the cloacal membrane.
And the cloacal membrane is the future anus.
Right. Now, the key structure to watch here is the connecting stalk. This is the embryo's lifeline. It's the precursor to the umbilical cord, connecting it to the placenta. Initially, it's attached right at the very tail end.
So if we didn't fold, our umbilical cord would be coming out of our lower back.
Or your tailbone, yeah. But as the tail curls under, that connecting stalk gets swung forward ventrally and attaches to what will be the belly. It ends up meeting the stalk of the yolk sac.
So the folding literally drags our entire life support system around to the center of our abdomen.
It does. And just like the head fold created the foregut by pinching the yolk sac, the tail fold pinches off the bottom part of the yolk sac to create the hindgut.
Which gives us the colon and the rectum.
And the cloaca, which is the primitive structure that gives rise to the urinary bladder. So now, thanks to these two folds, we have a blind pocket at the top and a blind pocket at the bottom.
But the whole middle section is still wide open to the yolk sac. We've got to roll up the sides. This is the horizontal plane, the lateral folding.
Right, this is the burrito metaphor we mentioned. Or, maybe a sleeping bag is better.
I'm kind of hungry, so let's stick with the burrito.
Okay, burrito it is. The embryo is the tortilla. The lateral body walls, and this is a key term, the somatopleur, they begin to roll down the sides to meet in the middle, in the ventral midline.
Use a fancy word there, somatopleur. Langman makes a really big deal about the split in the mesoderm, and I want to make sure we get it right because it's so important later.
It's absolutely vital. Okay, so you've got your three layers, ectoderm on top, endoderm on bottom, mesoderm in the middle. That middle layer, the mesoderm, splits. Imagine taking a thick piece of cheese and slicing it horizontally. You get two leaves.
Okay, 2 layers of cheese.
The top leaf of mesoderm sticks to the ectoderm, the skin layer.
Yeah.
That combination is called the somatopleur. The mnemonic is soma for body. It forms the body wall.
And the bottom leaf.
The bottom leaf of mesoderm sticks to the endoderm, the gut layer. That's called the splanchnopleur. Think splanchnic for organs or viscera.
So when we say lateral folding, what we really mean is that top layer, the somatopleur, the future body wall, is rolling down.
That's it. The sides roll down and they begin to zip up the ventral midline.
Mm.
Langman has great diagrams of this. He emphasizes this visualization. This movement is what brings the ectoderm all the way around the body. It's what closes the cylinder and makes skin.
But it can't be a complete zipper, can it? There has to be an opening left.
No, it can't close completely, not at the midgut. Unlike the foregut and hindgut, which are now these closed blind tubes, the midgut, the future small intestine, has to stay connected to the yolk sac. That's its source of nutrition. It's not ready to be independent yet.
So the zipper just stops there.
It leaves an opening. And as those lateral folds tighten, that connection to the yolk sac narrows down into a tube called the omphalloenteric duct, which you might also hear called the yolk stalk.
And that yolk stalk sits right next to the connecting stalk, the future umbilical cord that we talked about earlier.
Yes, and that ring where the body wall doesn't close, the point where the connecting stalk and the yolk stalk both emerge, that becomes the umbilical region.
Yeah.
That's your future belly button.
So we've done it. We've successfully turned a flat sheet into a cylinder. But it's not a solid cylinder, right? There's a space inside.
Right. And this brings us to the intraembryonic column. This is a concept that I.B. Singh explains really, really well, but the geometry can be tricky, and it confuses a lot of people.
Coulomb just means cavity, right? A space.
Exactly. Before any of this folding started, if you looked at the flat disc, the coulomb was this U-shaped or horseshoe-shaped cavity running through that middle mesoderm layer.
Okay, like a horseshoe just lying flat on a table.
Perfect analogy. The curve of the horseshoe is up at the top, near the future heart. The two limbs of the horseshoe run down the sides of the disc.
And the folding is going to completely change the orientation of this horseshoe.
Drastically. As the head folds, the curve of that horseshoe swings under and ventrally to become the pericardial cavity, the space where the heart will live. Then, as the sides fold in, the two limbs of the horseshoe are brought together in the midline.
And they form the other cavities.
They do. They form the initial connections that will become the pleural cavities for the lungs and the very large peritoneal cavity for the gut.
I want to circle back to that split you mentioned a minute ago, the somatopleur versus the splanchnopleur. You said the mesoderm splits to create this space. Why does a surgeon, 30 years later, care about that split from week 4?
Because of the nerves. This is the aha moment for clinical anatomy. The parietal layer, the lining of the body wall, comes from that somatopleur. It is innervated by somatic nerves.
Somatic nerves meaning precise, localized.
Meaning sharp, localized pain, the kind of pain you can point to with one finger. If you cut the skin or the muscle of the abdominal wall, you know exactly where it hurts.
And the visceral layer, the splanchnopleur covering the organs.
That's innervated by autonomic nerves. If you cut the bowel itself during surgery, the patient won't feel that sharp pain. In fact, you can burn or cut the intestine in a conscious patient, and they won't feel that specific trauma. They only feel things like distension or cramping. Vague, dull pain.
Okay, let's put this in a clinical vignette. A patient comes into the emergency room with appendicitis.
Perfect example. In the very early stages, the appendix itself is inflamed and it starts to swell. That stretches the visceral peritoneum, the splanchnopleur that's wrapped around it.
So the patient feels
A dull, vague ache right around their belly button. They can't really point to it. They'll gesture with their whole hand.
because it's autonomic.
Exactly. But as the appendicitis gets worse, the appendix swells so much that it starts to physically rub against the inside of the abdominal wall. It irritates the parietal peritoneum, the somatopleur.
And suddenly,
The pain character changes completely. It migrates, it becomes sharp stabbing, and moves to the right lower quadrant right over the appendix. That classic shift in pain, from vague and central to sharp and localized, is literally the inflammation jumping the embryonic gap between the two layers we created in week 4.
that is just fascinating. The history of the embryo literally dictates the diagnosis of the adult. Okay, so we've got this column, this big open plan apartment connecting the heart, lungs, and gut. But in an adult, those are very separate rooms.
They are. And initially, there are these temporary hallways, these passages, called the pericardioperitoneal canals. They connect the heart space directly to the belly space. We have to build some walls.
And this leads us to segment 5, the diaphragm, the great partition. I.B. Singh devotes a lot of attention to this in the chapter on body cavities.
It's a classic topic for anatomy exams for a reason. It's beautifully complex. The diaphragm isn't just one single muscle that appears out of nowhere. It's a patchwork quilt. It's assembled from 4 completely different embryological sources that have to find each other and fuse perfectly.
Okay, let's list them. Because if any one of these fails, we've got a major problem on our hands.
We do. Source 1, the septum transversum. We met this guy earlier. It started out above the head, swung down during that cranial somersault, and now it sits between the heart and the developing liver. It forms the central tendon of the diaphragm. It is the foundation.
Foundation.
Yeah.
Okay. Source number 2.
The pleuroperitoneal membranes. These are absolutely critical. Think of them as the shutters. They are two membranes that grow out from the back body wall to close off those hallways, the pericardioperitoneal canals.
Got it. Shutters.
Source 3.
The dorsal mesentery of the esophagus. Remember, the esophagus is running right through the middle of this construction site. The mesentery that suspends it helps form the crura of the diaphragm, the two muscular legs that anchor the diaphragm to the spine. And the final piece, source 4.
The body wall mesoderm. This is the simplest bit. It just grows inward from the lateral body walls to form the outer muscular rim of the diaphragm.
So let's recap. A central tendon from the septum transversum, shutters from the pleuroperitoneal membranes, crura from the esophagus mesentery, and a rim from the body wall. 4 distinct parts that have to fuse perfectly to separate the chest from the abdomen.
And they have to do it while the entire embryo is growing and stretching, which is just incredible.
Now, you teased this earlier, the phrenic nerve. Why on earth does a nerve from our neck control a muscle in our abdomen?
This is the amazing story of the descent of the diaphragm. Remember, the septum transversum, the foundation, it forms way up in the neck region. It picks up its muscle cells, the myoblasts, from cervical somites 3, 4, and 5.
C3, C4, C5. Right, because that's where it was located at the time.
Exactly. So the nerve fibers from the C3, C4, and C5 levels of the spinal cord grow into it. They're just growing into their local muscle. But then differential growth kicks in again. The back of the embryo grows way faster than the front. The heart descends, the lungs expand, and the diaphragm gets pushed down.
How far down?
It's a huge journey. It travels from that cervical neck level all the way down to the bottom of the chest, ending up around the level of thoracic vertebrae 27 to T12.
But the nerve is already plugged in.
The nerve is already attached. It's like plugging a lamp into a wall socket and then walking all the way across the room. The cord, the phrenic nerve, gets dragged along for the ride. It gets elongated, running all the way through the chest, past the heart, to reach the diaphragm.
Which gives us the classic mnemonic, C3, 4, 5, keeps the diaphragm alive.
That's the one. And it brilliantly explains the concept of referred pain. If you have irritation under your diaphragm, say from a gallbladder problem or blood from a ruptured spleen, that irritation signal travels up the phrenic nerve to the C3, C5 spinal levels.
And the brain gets that signal and thinks C3 to C5. That's the shoulder.
Exactly. Your brain interprets the pain as coming from the tip of your shoulder, even though the actual problem is way down in your abdomen. It's a sensory illusion created by the embryonic migration of the septum transversum.
That is the kind of insight that makes you look like an absolute wizard on the hospital wards. But because this process is so complex, 4 parts fusing this long migration, have to imagine it goes wrong fairly often.
It does. And that brings us to the really important clinical correlations. The big one here is CDH congenital diaphragmatic hernia.
Which is a life-threatening emergency for a newborn. What actually fails in the process?
In about 90% of cases, it's the shutters. The pleuroperitoneal membranes fail to fuse properly with the septum transversum.
So that hallway between the chest and the belly stays open.
It stays wide open. And specifically, the left side is the most vulnerable spot. This creates what's known as a Bachdelic hernia.
Bachdelic, that's the one in the back and to the side, posterolateral.
Yes. And the reason it's usually on the left is because the liver is growing so massively on the right side. It acts as a physical barrier, a plug. It basically protects the right side from herniating. The left side doesn't have that shield.
So if that hole is open, what happens at birth?
Physics happens. You have negative pressure in the chest and positive pressure in the abdomen. As soon as the baby takes its first breath, the abdominal organs, the stomach, the intestines, sometimes the spleen, get sucked upstairs into the chest cavity.
But here's the critical point that Moore really emphasizes. The problem isn't just that the stomach is in the wrong place. You can surgically move a stomach.
Right. The real life-threatening danger is what those organs do to the lungs while they're in the chest during development. They crowd them out. The lungs literally have no physical space to grow. This causes a condition called pulmonary hypoplasia.
Meaning the lung tissue itself is underdeveloped. It's not just squashed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can go in and surgically fix the hole after birth, but if the lungs haven't developed the alveoli they need for gas exchange, you can't fix that. The baby simply cannot oxygenate. That's why CDH is such a high mortality rate.
IB Singh mentioned some specific signs to look for in a newborn. Let's kind of simulate the delivery room here.
Okay, so you deliver a baby, it's immediately in respiratory distress, it's struggling to breathe, turning blue cyanosis. You look at the baby's belly.
And instead of being round and full like a normal baby's,
It's scaphoid,
scaphoid meaning.
sunken, concave,
Yeah.
like the shape of a boat,
Hmm.
because the guts aren't in the belly, they're up in the chest. The baby's tummy looks bizarrely flat or even hollowed out. That visual cue, a flat belly and a baby who can't breathe, is a screaming red flag for CDH.
Are there other kinds of diaphragmatic hernias we should know about?
There's the Morgagni hernia, which is retrosternal, right behind the breastbone. It's much, much rarer. And then there's the hiatal hernia, which is very common in adults.
Is that also a developmental failure?
Not usually a failure of the membranes to fuse.
Yeah.
That's more of an acquired looseness of the esophageal hiatus, the hole that's supposed to be there for the esophagus to pass through. The top of the stomach slides up through that opening. It causes a lot of heartburn, but it's not the same catastrophic hole in the floor that CDH is.
Okay, what about when the folding fails on the front? When that ventral body wall doesn't zip up properly?
You get a range of ventral wall defects.
Yeah.
If the zipper of lateral folding doesn't close the sides completely around the umbilical cord, the guts can protrude. IB Singh mentions a very specific, very descriptive type, the proboscoid umbilical hernia.
Proboscoid. You mean like a probus? Like an elephant's trunk?
Exactly. It looks like a trunk of skin and gut protruding from the navel.
Oh.
It's an extreme form of umbilical hernia where the folding process just didn't tighten that drawstring around the umbilical ring enough.
And Langman also talks about ectopia cordis.
That is the nightmare scenario. That's when the lateral folds fail to close over the chest wall at all, the sternum doesn't form, and the heart literally develops outside the body. It sits on the surface of the chest, beating in the open air. It's incredibly rare, but it's a stark illustration of just how vital that simple zipper mechanism is.
Okay, let's go back inside the abdomen. We've closed the wall, we've separated the chest from the belly. But the belly isn't just a big empty sac. It has this really complex geometry.
Right, and this is where we need to talk about mesenteries.
Which are basically the double layers of peritoneum that hold the gut to the body wall, like a suspension bridge for your intestines.
That's a great way to think of it. Imagine the gut tube is suspended from the back wall by a curtain. That's the dorsal mesentery. And initially, there's also a curtain attaching it to the front wall, the ventral mesentery.
But the ventral one mostly disappears, doesn't it?
Mostly. It degenerates for most of the gut tube to allow for movement, but it stays attached to the stomach and the liver. It goes on to form the lesser omentum and the falciform ligament. But that dorsal mesentery stays along the entire length of the gut.
Now, the stomach doesn't just hang there like a straight pipe. It moves.
It rotates. And this is absolutely crucial for understanding the final layout of the abdomen, especially the lesser sac. The stomach rotates 90 degrees clockwise around its longitudinal axis.
Okay, so if I'm looking down at the embryo from the top, it's turning clockwise. The original left side swings around to the front, and the right side swings around to the back.
Precisely. And because the stomach is attached to these curtains, the mesenteries, it twists them as it rotates. It pulls that long dorsal mesentery with it, creating a bag or a pocket behind the stomach.
And this is the lesser sac, also known as the omental bursa.
Exactly. It's a hidden room in the abdomen tucked away behind the stomach.
IB Singh has a specific detail about this, a very fine point, right? The nuaneric recess.
Yes, that's a deep cut for the distinction level student. The nuanteric recess is an early embryonic space that eventually forms the superior recess of the lesser sac. It's a fascinating remnant that shows just how interconnected the lung spaces and the gut spaces were before the diaphragm finished its job. It's a ghost of that old open-plan apartment.
And there's a doorway into this hidden room, isn't there?
There is. The epiploic foramen, or the foramen of Winslow. And surgeons use this every single day. If they need to get a look at the back of the stomach or the pancreas, they don't cut through the stomach. They find the foramen of Winslow and slide their instruments through it into the lesser sac.
It's just amazing to think that all these complex nooks and crannies, these essential surgical landmarks, are just the consequences of a simple tube twisting 90 degrees 4 weeks after conception.
It's all just geometry in motion.
Okay, segment 8. We've talked a lot about what happens, but how do we know when it's happening? If I'm looking at an early ultrasound or a lab specimen, how do I actually date it?
This is the Ready Reckoner part of our deep dive. Moore and Prasad, give us a great set of criteria for this.
In the earliest days, we just count somites, right?
In the very early 4th week, yeah, you could literally count the somites, those little blocks of mesoderm lining the spine. But very quickly, that becomes impossible. There are too many, and they start to fuse.
So what's the gold standard for a clinician doing an ultrasound?
It's CRL, ground rump length.
The sitting height, basically.
Basically, you measure from the vertex of the skull, the crown, to the midpoint between the buttocks, the rump. This is what you'll see on any early ultrasound report. It's the most accurate measure of age during the embryonic period because the legs are all curled up and their length is too variable.
But there's also a more formal system based on features, not just size, the Carnegie stages.
Yes, which is named after the Carnegie Institution of Washington. It doesn't rely on length. It uses specific external landmarks to assign a stage from 1 to 23. This allows researchers all over the world to compare embryos accurately, regardless of slight size differences.
All right, let's play a little game. I'll be the detective. I'll describe the embryo. You tell me the age.
Let's do it. Hit me.
Okay, specimen 1. I'm seeing paddle-shaped hands. No distinct fingers yet, just paddles. And I see these little bumps on the side of the neck.
Okay, those little bumps are the auricular hillox. They're going to fuse together to form the external ear and the paddles. That is classic week 6.
Week 6. Okay. Next one. I see clear notches between the fingers. They aren't fully separated yet, but you can see the rays are notched.
Ah, that's week 7. What you're seeing is the effect of apoptosis programmed cell death in the tissue between the fingers. It's carving out the digits. That's a hallmark of week 7.
And finally, the fingers are completely distinct and separated. The little tail that was there is gone, and I can see this band of blood vessels all around the head.
The scalp vascular plexus, that's week 8. That's graduation day.
Moore has a great line. He says by the end of week 8, the embryo has a distinctly human appearance.
And that's the milestone. Before that, it looks a bit like a generic vertebrate. You could be looking at a pig or a chick embryo and not be sure. By the end of week 8, it is undeniably human. And that marks the end of the embryonic period and the official start of the fetal period.
So let's bring this all together. We started with a flat 3-layer disc at the beginning of week 4.
Then we folded the top and the bottom to create the foregut and the hindgut, and crucially to move the heart down into the chest.
We folded in the sides like a burrito to close the body wall and form the midgut tube.
We split the mesoderm to create the body cavities, the caelum, which set the stage for how we feel pain for the rest of our lives.
We built a diaphragm from 4 different sources that had to come together and migrate south, dragging its nerve with it.
And we rotated the gut to create the complex hidden geometry of the abdomen. And we did all of that in about 4 weeks.
When you lay it all out like that, it's breathtaking.
It really is. It's a tightly scripted, unbelievable ballet of cells.
So what's the big takeaway for the listener? Why does all this matter beyond just passing the embryology exam?
Well, if you zoom out, this whole process explains the fundamental body plan of every vertebrate on the planet. We are a tube within a tube. We have an outer tube, the skin, and an inner tube, the gut. And in between, we have that caelum, that space that allows our organs to move and grow and function without ripping the body wall. It's the design for life.
And as we always do, let's leave you with a final thought to chew on.
Think for a moment about the insane precision we just described. The diaphragm requires 4 distinct tissues to migrate from different places and fuse at the exact right millisecond. If those pleuroperitoneal shutters close one day too late, the gut gets into the chest, the lungs fail, and life just isn't sustainable. The fact that this process works perfectly in the vast majority of us is a genuine statistical marvel.
It really is.
So here's a provocative thought for the next time you get the hiccups.
Oh, I hate hiccups. They're
Yeah.
the worst.
A hiccup is just an involuntary spasm of your diaphragm. But remember the nerve path we just talked about. That spasm is being triggered by a nerve signal that originates way up in your neck at C3, 4, and 5. The signal then has to travel all the way down your chest, past your heart, to reach the diaphragm in your belly.
It's a journey of, 30 centimeters?
It's a huge journey, a journey that was created by this process of embryonic folding. You are literally feeling the ghost of your own development, the dramatic descent of your diaphragm every single time you hiccup.
That is Weirdly comforting. Or maybe just weird. I can't decide.
I'll take weirdly comforting. It connects you directly to your own 4-week-old self.
If you really want to see this in action, go look at Figure 17.2 in IB Singh or Figure 5.1 in More. You can see the drawstring effect of the umbilical cord as it tightens. It really helps visualize how that burrito rolls up.
Absolutely. The diagrams make it all click.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you in the next episode where I think we might finally start building some limbs to go with this fancy new body tube we've made. Can't wait. It's going to be great.
See you then.